Right. Welcome everyone to this WIOA Summit 2021 on-demand session. This session is titled Employer-Led Talent Supply Chain Solutions, and we are joined by a panel of presenters today who will be discussing this topic. And we're going to start off with our first presenter, Jamie Francis.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, and great to be with you all. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic of employer-led talent supply chain solutions. I have the great pleasure of being joined by two of my colleagues, Tracy DeSanto from DTE Energy and Lakeisha Miller from the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center. These two fantastic people and colleagues are both talent pipeline management practitioners, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk to you all today about the talent pipeline management movement, which is led by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is the nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We have the great privilege of working with colleagues like Lakeisha and Tracy from all across the country to identify ways in which we can enhance the employer role in education and workforce partnerships. So the way that we're going to instruct today's conversation is I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about talent pipeline management from the national perspective. I'll then hand things over to my two colleagues to individually present on talent pipeline management implementation in their respective communities. And then we'll come together for a group discussion so that I can grill them on the ins and outs of the fun things that makes up their TPM implementation within their communities. So to start at a very high level in terms of what talent pipeline management is and what it aims to achieve, is what we're really looking to do is to unlock employer leadership and engagement in their education and workforce partnerships. TPM started off as a white paper back in 2014, in which our colleagues laid out this concept of taking supply chain management principles, something that companies are very familiar with and comfortable with, and applying it to talent. Very quickly, we want to make sure that folks do not misconstrue our intentions to say, students are not widgets and institutions are not factories, but at the same time, this concept of putting the employer in this end customer role so that they can be more clear, more coherent communicators of what their talent needs are is something that has wins for all parties. So the first image that you see before you is that very typical supply chain series of relationships, starting with raw materials and taking something and adding value to it before it gets to that end customer. In the second and third images, what you're seeing is that play out from a talent perspective. So a student or worker going through a variety of education and training experiences with support services along the way that will lead to a seamless transition as they work towards employment. This can also work in a career advancement situation. So TPM is really meant to be an end-to-end talent supply chain solution. In that third image, what we're trying to capture is that the employer community has a very important role in clearly signaling what are the pathways, what are the various steps and services and experiences that a person should have as they are preparing for an employment or career advancement opportunity. And we as the employer community need to do a better job of sending more clear signals to the talent marketplace, whether that be students and workers themselves or education and training institutions, to signal this is what our critical need is. Here is the quality standards we intend for it to meet. Here's where we need this talent and within what time. So taking these general principles to really try to posit students and workers in a place that they're going to achieve the best possible outcomes is really what TPM is all about. TPM is set up as a structure of 6 strategies. So this framework is meant to meet communities where they're at. Many of them have existing public-private partnerships, and what we're trying to do with talent pipeline management is to identify opportunities that we can provide a value-added service to ongoing initiatives, or if a group of employers is coming together for the first time. But this 6 strategy framework that you see before you is what serves as a guidebook for folks who are going through TPM implementation. And the very first step that we like to talk about in TPM is actually not on the screen before you, but it's called the Tpm Orientation. And it's participating in presentations and conversations such as this one, in which we're trying to familiarize people with TPM as an approach and what it is meant to do versus what it's not meant to do, because we would never want to sell it as a silver bullet. But what you'll realize with this 6-step strategy that you see before you is that this is meant to be an agile framework that achieves an employer return on investment while shooting for shared accountability, competitiveness, and improved outcomes for all parties involved. This very first strategy for organizing for employer leadership and collaboration is when we are bringing together a group of employers, what we call an employer collaborative, to identify what is their biggest pain point surrounding their talent challenges. So that might be unfilled job openings, exorbitant onboarding and training costs, lack of career advancement opportunities, or high retention, or perhaps increasing their workforce diversity. But what we're looking for is some consensus among a group of employers coming around a table so that they can go through this talent pipeline management process together. We want to make sure that they have a clear focus on the front end. The second strategy, projecting critical job demand, is trying to answer the basic question of how many of what job. Once the employers have determined their focus, we then need to get a clear understanding of where are those critical jobs that they're having the most difficulty filling. This may not always be the highest number of job openings. So number does not always determine criticality. What we're really trying to get at is which are the jobs and how many of those jobs is what's keeping an employer from being able to grow or expand their business. As we transition into strategy 3, we're trying to highlight what are the hiring requirements tied to these critical jobs, and is there an opportunity for the employers to come around some consensus on how to describe those jobs. Employers that make up an employer collaborative are not required to come out of the process with identical job descriptions. We do not think that that will happen. But you can imagine the power that an education and training provider, partner, or a student or worker would feel if they had a clear understanding that, hey, there are 15 employers in my region who are all saying that these 10 skills are the absolute most critical for me to be able to achieve what I need to transition into this job. Once we get to strategy 4, where we're analyzing talent supply, we're trying to answer basic questions such as, where does my talent currently come from? And are there untapped potential sources of talent that I should think about expanding or starting a relationship with? We're also wanting to start to have a better understanding of what does the population in my area look like? Are there opportunities for me to access working age population to fill the talent demand that I have identified as a part of strategy 2? Once we get to strategy 5, we're going to start to bring other partners around the table. So the employers have now had this opportunity to collect and arm themselves with really powerful data that's at their fingertips. And now we want to share that data with preferred providers of talent so that we can co-develop talent supply chain solutions together. We're going to use performance as an important critical part of the TPM process. So we'll have a clear understanding as a group of what are our performance goals and how are we going to go about achieving those goals through the solutions that we're co-designing together. And then strategy 6 is, of course, a very critical step in the TPM process, in that continuous improvement will always be available. We'll always be seeking ways that we can enhance our work and continue to improve the return on investment witnessed by the employers, the students and workers, and the institutions. Resiliency planning is an interesting component in that we all were faced with many new workforce challenges over this past year plus. And TPM is meant to be an agile process that can help prepare and really think through as a community how we're going to tackle new talent challenges that come our way as a result of either man-made or natural disasters. So that's a bit of an overview of the TPM process, but I have found for the past several years that nothing really speaks to the TPM process like our partners and our firsthand practitioners. So with that, I'm going to transition over to my colleague, Tracy DeSanto, who's a senior manager of workforce planning and analytics at DTE Energy based in Michigan. And I'm thrilled that Tracy was able to join us today. So with that, Tracy, I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate the introduction, and this has been such an amazing journey. And I was lucky enough to be a part of the First Learning Network in 2014. I can't believe it. You know, things happen for a reason. I know when I met Jason Tishko and Bob Sheets at that event, I had said to them that the stars were aligning in the way that we needed to be focusing on that in the state of Michigan. And we were able to start the movement and have continued to do really great work. I also play the role of the Michigan Energy Workforce Development co-chair. I co-chair that consortium with Consumers Energy, Sharon Miller, who's also a TPM fellow. The reason I'm mentioning all of this is it's important to continue to get individuals across the state understanding and really having a clear understanding of the program itself, to be able to continue to utilize these tools that have been provided through the talent pipeline management process. We use the framework and have been using this framework since that time. And what I'm sharing with you here, I'll tell you about in a minute, but the tools that are provided through the talent pipeline management process have helped us for years now. And we continue to redesign some of the things that we even started, way back then. What I'm getting at here, though, and I'm going to share something with you as it relates to DTE Energy, and it's specific, some of it's specific to the company, but the information around it, every company really is driving towards, and why my role in workforce planning is so important is really understanding our workforce strategy. To do that, we need to understand the strategic direction of what the company is doing, maybe what your region is doing, whatever that group that you're working in. It's important to understand what's the direction around the workforce. For us, and the way that I've shared this here, once we understand that information, we understand the data, it's really driving then what we're going to do as it relates to talent pipeline, workforce development, D&I, sourcing and planning. And it does relate to all the things that Jamie just mentioned around demand planning and competencies and all of that. Those tools are important for us to be able to leverage and to be able to utilize that information to keep us structured. And that structure has been so helpful, and it's simple. And that's the things that I've gravitated to, and I know many of my colleagues have as well. What I'm showing you here is something that the structure of DTE and the different groups in our HR organization that are responsible for different aspects of this. It's really understanding what the organization looks like. So for us, the workforce planning and development groups get involved with this information. It shifts over into our talent planning and talent sourcing and acquisition. And then we have HR strategy and many other components in our organization. Our D&I structure fits behind that, and then our data and solutions. So it's understanding for us what's in our organization and how does it fit? What are our priorities as a company? And then how do we leverage the tools that we're given through the talent pipeline management process? You can go to the next slide. Here's a tool I'm telling you I use all the time. And what I do, and this tool is the value stream, and it's part of the talent pipeline management process. And we were so excited to help, in building these tools. I use this all the time to be able to say where and what are the things that the company is doing. So this is DTE specific, right? But it can be leveraged by DTE. It can be leveraged by the consortium. It can be leveraged by a chamber group that's doing work. And what we do is we look at where are the things that we are actually working on, where are pain points, as Jamie mentioned, and what kinds of things do we want to focus on is specifically. And in this case, this is one of our gas specific and our enterprise work that we're doing. And so we're looking at the pipeline that feeds into the company. And then, what are the things that we're doing to retain and upskill individuals once they join the organization. But it's very important for us to keep that in front of us as we're doing our work. And so when I use the tools, steps 1 through 6, I'm always thinking about this aspect of the work that we're doing. And so specifically for DTE, we continue to do this work. And I'm going to hone in on the career preparation, pre-employment and training area specifically. And you'll see that in red, and then down below some of the work that we're doing there. And I'm going to have you take a look down in the gas area where we're talking about workshops. And those workshops are specific things we're doing in collaboration with our educational partners and with other industry partners to actually build these workshops to help individuals to gain skills to be successful in securing a position at a company. We continue to think about those things as we're doing this work. We have another project that we're working on now, which is around customer service. And again, in that career preparation space, we're thinking about, again, if you go back to the 6 steps, what step 2 was the demand. What's the demand in that space? We're doing that cross-functionally again with multiple industry partners, not just in energy. And so that customer service program being led by our Deborah Majeski, who is also getting training or has received training in this space, again, is really important. And she is pulling the individuals together, understanding the competencies, scoping it in a way, as mentioned earlier, identifying the scope that allows them to be successful in delivering on a program that's going to help individuals gain really great skills and then get the pull from those industry partners. The TPM model has been really instrumental in that entire process of identifying who are all the right players from industry, government, and education, and then walking them through the steps of that process methodically to be able to get to the point where we launch a program, we get companies to hire from that program, and then they retain them. Just wanted to share some of those activities of how we have leveraged the tools. There's so many other things that I could probably go and talk about, Jamie. I know there's going to be questions after, but this is some of the examples of what we have used and how we leverage the tools.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And you represent such a great perspective in that you're an employer, but you're also playing this leadership role as part of the consortia with longstanding knowledge of TPM and have identified numerous ways to leverage the framework, both for the gas workers and others within your company. But then I think that customer service aspect that's cross-functional is also just so incredibly interesting. So I'm excited to dive into a conversation with you after we have an opportunity to hear from Lakeisha. So with that, I'm going to transition over to our colleague, Lakeisha Miller. Lakeisha also plays a really interesting role in that she is the talent pipeline system leader for the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center. And she'll talk to you a bit about what that means and the fantastic team that she has working with her at the Kentucky Chamber. So Lakeisha, we'll hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And it's really a pleasure to be able to speak about Kentucky, specifically how we've implemented TPM across the state. So next slide, Jamie. Perfect. So this quote is really sums up what we've dealt with since starting TPM in Kentucky. So workforce isn't something that you solve, it evolves. And I think that's true for Kentucky, that's true across the world, right? We've certainly experienced COVID, as well as other workforce challenges that has creeped into with our employers, with how we have executed our collaboratives across the state. So what I'd love to do is just kind of dig a little deeper into how we've implemented TPM in Kentucky and what that looks like. So just a little history, in 2018, the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center partnered with the Kentucky Cabinet for Education and Workforce Development and was chosen by the U.S. Chamber Foundation to implement TPM statewide. So this is really great because what we've been able to do since 2018 is really engage employers all across Kentucky through various industries, from manufacturing to healthcare and to some of Kentucky's signature industries, equine and the distilling industry. Next slide. So to date, I'm happy to just announce here, we've been able to engage over 200 employers across Kentucky, working with our employers on personalized talent solutions that ensure that Kentuckians are trained, developed, and upskilled into in-demand career pathways. So of course, I mean, that's a pretty big assessment. I always joke and say, TPM in Kentucky, we're still preschoolers, right? We're just a baby. We're just 2 years, a little over 2 years old. And to have that level of reach, it's really been a significant impact. So it's not just us, right? It's not just the chamber. So I can't take full credit for that. But when we started this initiative in Kentucky, we trained 40 champions in TPM. And these champions ranged from local chamber members, champions in our education, workforce, and even government partners. We wanted to make sure they had a fundamental understanding of TPM and what we wanted to accomplish throughout the state. So, and these champions, they really have a pulse on their community. They understand the needs of their community, and really created a partnership really with our project managers to identify where's the best place to start, right? Who should we start engaging first? And they really were a critical partner in connecting us with our employers. So what I'd like to do, next slide, please, Jamie, thanks. So let me introduce you to the backbone of TPM in Kentucky. It's our project managers. Go back one slide, Jamie. Perfect, thanks. So let me introduce you to the backbone of talent pipeline management here in Kentucky. So we have a team of 5 dynamic project managers that really have a regional approach to this work. So for instance, myself, my role in this program, I'm the director of TPM in Kentucky. So basically, I get to oversee TPM's implementation across the state. But the benefit of our project managers, they're really the boots on the ground that's going to make those connections locally and really be able to drive TPM in a meaningful way. So these efforts by the team, by the project managers and the champions, they've truly led to some remarkable results that has positioned us to create a direct impact to Kentucky's workforce, which is no small feat. So next slide, Jamie. Thanks. So over the last 2 years, like I said, we're preschoolers, right? But I've talked a little bit about the impact that we've been able to make with TPM. So what I wanted to do is just show you some of the data, show you where our collaboratives have formed. So as you can see, we have collaboratives in quite a few different industries, and we've been able to evaluate about 153 plus critical positions to date. So a lot of those critical positions, like Jamie mentioned, it's really going to be focused on filling those positions that employers have a hard time finding talent for. And that's really helpful, right? So this data really represents a 2 to 4 year demand of about 23 plus, so 23,000 plus positions in our state across various industries. So these numbers are just going to continue to grow, right? Especially we're still, I guess, navigating our way through COVID and figuring it out. So some industries have definitely been impacted more significantly as a result of COVID. And those are things that we're working with our employers now to figure out, how has COVID changed this demand, right? How has it impacted where we once were? So those are conversations that the project managers continuously have with their collaborative members, or as they're in the community, again, speaking to employers or partners to discuss TPM. So one of the things, still looking at the data, one of the things that's been really helpful is our partnership with our state data system, KY Stats or Kentucky Stats. So with TPM, we're collecting real-time data, right? Real in-demand data of what are our employers finding the most critical. And as we collect this real-time information from employers, we share that information with our state data system, right? Because ultimately what we want is to ensure that our workforce dollars are being spent where they are most needed. So we have an incredible partnership with KY Stats, and we continuously partner with them, and we're still working with them to this day. So, that's a partnership. I don't think we anticipate parting ways anytime soon. So with all that said, I think this work has positioned TPM very, very well in Kentucky as we actively work to co-engineer solutions and get Kentuckians to work, quite frankly. So next slide. So this slide is really an impactful slide because I think it's very easy for us to tell the quantitative story or the qualitative story, excuse me, but sometimes it's a little harder to tell that quantitative story. Well, I know you want to get people to work. Well, how many people have you connected to work or jobs or training? So as you read on this slide, to date, we've been able to connect about 1,900 Kentuckians to jobs, trainings, work-based learning opportunities, and we've connected 200 schools to work-based learning opportunities in our state. So these are some pretty amazing numbers considering, again, TPM's only been a part of Kentucky's workforce development for 2 years. So what I want to do is just dive into, still on this slide, how did we get some of these metrics or how did we get some of these things moving? And I know in the discussion piece, we'll probably get into it, but we have some key partnerships with our workforce center programs. So at the chamber, so we at the onset of COVID, everybody was in a panic and, unemployment numbers were skyrocketing. But at the workforce center, we really wanted to understand who is hiring, which employers are hiring at this time. So we started the Who's Hiring campaign, and we gathered over 95,000 jobs to date of employers saying, hey, we need talent, we need them in these various industries. So that program has been instrumental, as well as our Bus to Business program, which is really focused on connecting students with employers all across the state. And I can certainly dive into that a little later, but this program has been able to reach over 40,000 students in our state since launching in 2019. So it gives students a real opportunity to connect with employers, and TPM has partnered with both of those initiatives to really bring employers to the table and connect locally with some of our schools. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so what you're seeing on your screen is really TPM's largest pipeline to date, which shouldn't be a surprise. It's healthcare. So of course, through COVID, the need for nurses and various professions in the healthcare space has increased. But in Kentucky, we have 8 collaboratives built, or we had built 8 collaboratives throughout the state. So we've engaged 49 different healthcare providers, and evaluated 36 unique critical positions, which has a projection of a little over 12,000 healthcare positions needed across Kentucky in the next 4 years. So the awesome thing is we've been able to engage quite a diverse pool of employers with this work. As you can see just from the picture, it ranges from hospitals to long-term care facilities. So we really get a good understanding of what the healthcare picture looks like. So we've actually executed some pretty interesting pipelines through this work. In the eastern part of our state, we have some exciting stories that's come out of that, which I'll get into a little later. And more things are popping up in terms of healthcare really making that impact. Next slide, Jamie. So what you see on the screen is just a couple of barriers. So through our work, of course, we're getting that real-time data about demand. We're gaining consensus about, hey, what competency and credentials are most important. But when we get to that point where we are working with our education and workforce partners to really build that pipeline, it's important for us to do supply analysis, right? Where are the chinks in the talent pipeline? Why hasn't it worked up to this point? And sometimes the early assumption is, well, we just need more, right? And we're not necessarily aware of some of the barriers that could exist. So on your screen, you can see there's tons of barriers across our state, specifically in the healthcare space. I mean, it ranges from, generally life issues all the way to broadband, transportation, some of the things that, come to mind for you. So these have been key in helping us to make really good partnerships, not only at a local level, but at a state level, to create the impact that we need to address these barriers and create a lasting impact on our workforce, specifically in healthcare. Next slide. So this is pretty exciting. And, up to this point, we've spoken about some of the data that we've collected, some of the initial impacts of this program in Kentucky. What you see on your slide is what we're calling the Talent Pipeline Management Educational Insights. So currently in our state, we spend about $1.2 billion conservatively to train and upskill Kentuckians. And one thing we want to do is we want to make sure if we're going to put this level of an investment out there, we want to make sure that we're sending clear signals to our educational workforce partners to really figure out, like, where do we need those trainings to develop our Kentuckians and put them into career pathways that are going to be most needed to support Kentucky's economy. So this report basically comes directly out of the competency and credential analysis that we've done with our employers over the last 2.5 years. And it aims to identify, not just at a state level, but at a regional level, what are those educational insights? So where are our employers saying, hey, we need, for these critical positions that we've evaluated, we're going to need more industry certifications. We're going to need to develop a meaningful pathway to make sure that once our kids get our high school diploma, where do they need to go, right? So it's been something that we literally just launched last month, and it's already made headway. And one of the things that we want to do with these insights is just create a regional counselor professional development sessions, just introducing counselors to career pathways that they're probably not as familiar with, because they are truly helping to advise students in school. What does work look like? What does the workforce look like? So we want to make sure that we're really giving our education partners and workforce partners just insights into what businesses really want. So last slide is really the same quote, right? So we know, based on everything we just discussed, the workforce system is not something that we can solve. But with TPM, it's been extremely helpful to, and Jamie said a great word before, it's been an agile process that we have used through all the ups and downs that has just continuously built Kentucky's workforce. So thank you so much for just giving me a moment or two to talk about what we've built in Kentucky, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lakeisha. Really appreciate you. And one thing that I want to touch on before we launch into the conversation is, Tracy and Lakeisha have been incredible leaders in the TPM network. And they both touched on kind of the evolution of our TPM practitioners, and that Tracy participated in our original pilot way back in 2015 as we were testing out TPM as, a theory and trying to put it into practice. And Lakeisha and the Kentucky team have been part of that incredible evolution once we started our official TPM Academy training. So for those of you who are wondering, okay, it's great that you all have this framework that exists. How do I leverage the framework? Is we host a TPM Academy both nationally as well as for specific regions or states or industry associations, in which we facilitate the training. And so much of this data collection that we're talking about, that's something that we automate and streamline through a customized web tool that we built as we were creating the TPM Academy. But for those of you who are interested in the curriculum that we use for that training, it's available at the Talent Supply Chain So just wanted to mention that before we launched into our group discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can engage in a robust conversation, a lot that I would love to talk with both of you about. And some of these questions will be directed at both of you. Others, I'll specify who the question is geared towards. But Tracy, I'd love to start with you, given your longstanding leadership within the TPM network. And I'm curious because I know that your engagement in that Michigan Energy Workforce Development Consortia, that had been going on for a couple of years before TPM came about. So I'm curious, why do you feel like the TPM approach worked well for both the consortia and then DTE Energy specifically, and how was it different from the other efforts that you guys had tested out?
Thanks, Jamie, for asking. And yeah, I had been co-chair for the consortium probably a good year and a half, 2 years before, getting exposed to the talent pipeline management process. It was mostly project based, and it was focused a lot of times on the big utilities, and not as maybe as collaborative, even though it brought in partners from across the state. And I think that this model, this approach, of course, we had, step one already, in place. We had a collaborative. It just wasn't using maybe a structure that this allowed us to leverage, and it's using terms that then are consistent, not just by one company, but across multiple companies, and now across the nation, which is a really great benefit for this. So by using, and that's what attracted me really, is to the structure, the simplicity, and the supply chain model, which really talks to businesses, right, around how to leverage. And so the terminology that's used is easily, leveraged in having conversations with different partners. And as you mentioned, that we went on to launch a TPM Academy network in the state of Michigan. Our consumers energy group drove much, if not all of that work, our Sharon Miller, and important for us to have others understand the model and the tool, so that when you're having conversations, no matter where you are in the state, there is someone that that you can leverage that has that kind of thought process and can use that structure. But that's really what attracted me, and I know our consortium, was leveraging, knowing that those are steps in a process that people can easily understand, the simplistic way of having that conversation, so that leaders and individuals that are boots on the ground all get that concept.
That's so helpful. And I love that the framework concept, the structure, that's what resonated with you, because that's what we hear from a lot of our partners, is that, we had this group coming together, we had a lot of discussions, but nothing that was really moving us forward. And the data collection piece in particular is something that can move folks forward. So same for you, Lakeisha. You came into the Kentucky Chamber where TPM was already kind of bought into by the chamber, but you were really a part of this kind of evangelist group of educating champions and bringing project managers who are going to dedicate their full time. What was it about the TPM process that even made you want to apply for that job? And why do you think it's worked well for the way that Kentucky kind of organized within the Commonwealth?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I will say is it's first of all, me personally, I'm always excited and energized by anything new. Number one. So in terms of why did I apply, that's just a part of my personality. I'm going to rally around things that's going to make an impact in the community. And I think when you are able to absorb TPM for what it is, it's a direct impact in the community. And being a part of that inaugural class, I think I touched on it in the presentation, it wasn't just the project managers. I think it probably would have been a little bit more scary if it was just us going into our communities and saying like, oh, do this with us. But we were armed with those champions, and we were armed with those, our local WIBs, so workforce investment boards, and our local chambers. And then we had really made champions out of some of the employers that we worked with. So now we had employers saying, wow, this process really makes sense. And it was different than other workforce initiatives because it wasn't just bringing the employer in an advisory capacity. They were really engaged and involved in the process throughout. And you touched on it, they were a part of supporting every part of this process. So we grew a lot of employer champions along the way. I think from a chamber perspective, advocating on behalf of business constantly, we heard that, right? Like, hey, we can't find people, we can't find people, we can't find people. And I think at that time, our chamber president, Dave Atkinson, was like, he said to Beth Davison, our executive director with the Workforce Center, go forth and build a workforce center for the chamber. Let's not just complain about not finding people. How can we put some fundamental solutions in place that will help address those needs? So I really think that, under that vision, and of course, the process of TPM, as Tracy mentioned, is so simple and so easy to understand. And it's almost like a common sense thing that I think it was really easy to arm ourselves with our champions and some of our champion employers and, do what we've done in such a short period of time in Kentucky.
That's so helpful. And I really want to emphasize that point, especially given we named this session Employer-Led Talent Supply Chain Solutions. So I want to emphasize this role of the employer as part of the TPM process. And you started to really hit the nail on the head with both of you with some of your talking points. So I want to take it a step further in terms of the role that these employers play, in terms of their, participation in these meetings and the development of solutions. Talk to me about what that looks like for the collaboratives that have been created in Kentucky thus far.
Yeah, so I mean, you said it. The role of the employer is critical. Nobody wants to force somebody to do something. So the employers that we have within our collaboratives, they are equally as passionate about what we're doing. They want that impact. And in fact, a lot of the employers in the collaboratives, when we're going through the TPM process and we start getting that data, sometimes the employers would say, hey, let's let's pause. We don't want to move forward because we want to drill down into this number even forward. So an example that comes to mind is we have a healthcare collaborative in the Louisville area. And of course, they chose registered nurses as a critical position. And, they got their initial demand data back and they go, well, that's interesting. That demand is way more than we thought it would be collectively with everybody contributing. And they said, let's drill down. I mean, what's really contributing to some of those replacement position numbers? Is it turnover? Is it retirement? Are we simply upskilling people into more advanced registered nursing roles? And, again, that just speaks to the process. That was an employer-led. I mean, the project manager at the time did not lead that. I mean, of course, they were the driving force to making sure that collaboration continued to happen, but it just speaks to the process. And I think we've seen so many examples of that across the state all the time, where, we've had employers join us on the national stage talking about TPM and what that's meant to them and how they have changed some of their practices because of the process.
I love that. And I love hearing, I've heard Steve Rudolph from Baptist Health talk about TPM numerous times in which he started off as a critic and was like, I'm not sure I really buy into this concept. And then he himself just got so excited by what the data was revealing that he really bought in and became a huge advocate and has really been one of our best spokespeople.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And Tracy, for you are the employer, right? So I think that it's always really great to get your take on this in terms of what's kept you engaged in this process. What still continues to bring you excitement about revelations that kind of going through the TPM experience in an ongoing way has meant for you as an employer and working with other employers in your region. I know that you guys think so intentionally about the smaller employers and how they supply you with talent and you all working collaboratively.
Well, Jamie, I think, so Lakeisha, you said it best, making sure you have champions, and those champions need to be able to see success. The focus is on the jobs, right? And one of the executives in our company who's coached me over time, and is very involved in a lot of the workforce efforts in the city of Detroit, he's really said, Tracy, we really need to be focusing on things and not just training for training's sake. We need to ensure that we are placing individuals in jobs. And probably one of the biggest reasons I'm so involved and so focused is really, focusing on individuals with barriers and giving them the opportunity, rising tides raise all ships, right? So the opportunity here and the work that we've been doing is really intentionally focused on, giving access to individuals to training. But back to your comment around, employers, we can create training programs for one-offs, and that's a lot of what companies do. They work with a community college, they create a non-credited course, but when that company pulls away, the program goes away, right? It needs to be something that's sustainable. And so it's really one of our taglines for the consortium is the power of partnerships. And it's so important to have a collaborative of more than one company that does need these same competencies, that when one company isn't in need, another company is, so that we're not putting the educational partners at risk too, right? And also, the individual, the student that's coming through a program, right? It needs to be sustainable. And so it's so important for us to ensure that we've got more than one company and that we're all driving in the same direction. We're looking at the demand in the region and in the state and in those particular industry sectors to ensure that we're doing something that is going to be here over time, or that we shift over time when those pathways change. And it's important for an employer and multiple employers to be involved in that on an ongoing basis. I can say, you can look over time and, the companies probably stepped away from that and started to create their own training programs instead of, working directly with our industry, our educational partners. And we've kind of broken, the pathway. And so it's so important for us to keep the employers engaged on an ongoing basis. And they need to see the incentives of staying there by getting great talent and qualified and diverse talent coming out of these pipelines.
Well, you all have been an amazing example to show that this is not just a one-off, this is not just a one and done. Our talent strategy has to be ongoing, and we have to consistently think, how can we make it better, 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 so that we're eliminating those barriers, making sure that we're creating inclusive talent pipelines and really creating successful outcomes for all partners. I love that. And while, TPM, we get to tout how much it is employer-led, you both have also really beautifully messaged how it's not employer alone, that there's power in partnerships, that there is certainly a lot of importance of bringing those partners to the table, working on these solutions together so that they don't go away in vain, after one person steps away. So I think that that's really come across to me, and hope it has for the audience as well. We know that these things are not easy. I'm curious to hear from you all. What has been the biggest obstacle you've experienced as part of your implementation, and how have you overcome that? So I'll start with Lakeisha and then go to Tracy.
Yeah, no, I love this question, because everything is not sunshine and roses, right? Like that's just not reality. And the question in terms of what's the biggest obstacle that we faced, I think here in Kentucky, it's just the attrition of people that, let's say, with that inaugural class that we had in 2018, and we got all these champions. Well, people move, they change roles, and now you're like, oh man, I'm gonna have to recruit this another champion, and your fingers crossed that they're just as engaged as the other person was. So I definitely can see where that, just normal shift and ebbing and flowing, just people moving to different jobs, that slowed down some work in some communities. And in others, it was unaffected, because what we preach, at least what I preach with my project managers, is we need to get the C-suite bought in, right? Like, and once they're bought in, it trickles down from there. So I think a lot of times it's super easy to just go to the HR generalist and say, hey, is this something you can kind of do as a passion project? But inevitably, when things get busy, then they're like, oh, I can push this to the side. And I think in the beginning, when we were just getting, you know, our feet under us, those are some of the early mistakes that we made, just like so excited and overjoyed just to get somebody to say yes. That, you know, those are some of the early hiccups. But I think once we started to mature in our process and really understood the value of having the entire organization bought in, as opposed to just one person, because people will move and that's fine. That's where we've seen the program shine in Kentucky. But, you know, I'm very transparent. That is some of the biggest roadblocks that we have currently, but also really in the beginning of just learning how to implement the process.
Lakeisha, I can't agree with you more. I'm also going to speak a little bit about the champions, as she mentioned earlier. For us, I think there's a couple things that, you know, always draw concern when you're trying to pull together a group of individuals. It's how much time am I going to have to commit to this effort? And, oh, I just don't think, you know, that we're going to be able to, you know, stay on and do. And it's really about ensuring that you're methodical. And we've done that multiple times in the efforts that we've been, you know, working on. It's important to have those champions, though, those key champions that are really helping to support, that see the value, that help to support the efforts to kick these things off, to stay engaged in these activities. And so I would just say the time and effort, ensuring that you have more than one person who is experienced in talent pipeline is another opportunity. And when you're the only person in the room that understands it, it's a heavy load for one person. It's doable though, as long as you follow the process and that you truly, you know, get the champions and you're able to get that support to drive the work efforts and to be methodical about it and to let people know, look, if we follow the process, it's not as big of a lift as most people think, because a lot of times when you're doing this work, you're starting from scratch. You're trying to figure out what's the scope, the process is already laid out. So it's very easy to go through those steps and to be methodical about it and to ensure, again, that you have the proper champions there to help support. And then the other thing that we know now is that producing, you know, results. So once you have examples, and now we do, and you can go and you can talk to Kentucky and bring Kentucky to your state and to talk to specific companies about the success, or Texas or Virginia, or right where you see the success. That's the other thing that wasn't necessarily available in the beginning that's very available now.
Very, very true. We are lucky to have so many incredible partners across the country and now across the border who are implementing TPM in their communities and have become incredible examples of success. And success looks a little bit different for all of our TPM practitioners. And I think that that's something that adds to the magic of the network. Well, we're moving into the lightning round. So my first lightning round question is for you, Tracy. As you think about your experience with TPM, up to this point, what would you say you're most proud of?
You know, for the things that we've been able to accomplish here in the state of Michigan, we identified a pain point that removed barriers from multiple places in identifying the 17th career cluster in energy for Michigan, in the sense that that opened up opportunities for us to be able to get federal funding to our high schools and to our colleges. So to me, that in and of itself has been, you know, such an amazing accomplishment to be able to provide. But it is also about the placement of and the completers of these programs and the jobs that are at the end of that, and really gaining momentum with those industry partners has just been so exciting to see it grow across the state. I would say if Sharon Miller was here to speak for me, she would say the TPM Academy, because that was the very second thing. That was such an amazing accomplishment to be able to do that and to be able to drive that across the state and have the state actually pick up the responsibility to drive that even further. So two things, not just one.
I'm always all for multiple accomplishments being celebrated, but yes, getting to host 2 TPM academies with your colleagues with Consumer Energy's leadership was just absolutely incredible, and we're lucky to count the Talent Investment Agency among our strong partner now. So thank you for that. And Lakeisha, how about you?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, especially because as director, I get to see all of the amazing things throughout the state, right? So I think really I can bucket it in a couple different ways. So one, it's always going to be about the impact for me, right? And I think that's what drives me every single day. So like I said, I think we got to a place in the beginning, to Tracy's point, that you didn't have those examples, right? You were just like, I promise you, this is gonna work. And it was on your shoulder, like how convincing can you be? So I think what I'm most proud of is to see this program 2.5 years later and having really concrete examples, like in Eastern Kentucky, them using the TPM data that they got in their healthcare collaboratives to apply for a DOL grant. And they were awarded $2.5 million in January to really implement career navigators and other supportive roles to help nursing students move through and complete, right, and move on to the workforce. So, I mean, that is huge. I mean, we're also seeing other employers get creative about how can you support talent, right? So examples could include, creating like a career bridge program. All right, you work with us for a little bit, but we're going to make sure that we have a bridge in place to, for instance, if you're working in a logistics company, but your passion is really to, become a nurse or work in construction, we're starting to see our employers make those connections, right? So like that is really amazing. And I think the second one is just, I'm really proud to see how many champions we've grown, so we've had that kind of individual 40 champions in the beginning. And like I said, some have moved on, but the project managers and their passion and, our passion at a state level, I just think we've grown other champions. So now it's really cool just to hear people reference TPM as, the workforce solution for Kentucky, and, come on these stages and help to grow TPM in other states and just provide that level of support. I think that's really been a proud moment, not just for me, but when I think of my team.
Absolutely. And we're just thrilled to be along the ride with you all and supporting you. So our final word before we close out, for the folks who are watching this presentation and you've now piqued their interest. They think that this TPM thing sounds pretty cool, but they're not completely bought in. What would you suggest as a first next step for those who are considering taking on TPM as a talent strategy for their community? So Tracy, let's go to you first.
And I'm going to apologize if my dog's barking in the background. So this is the day in technology, right? Okay, so one of the things that I would say is go slow to go fast. And the reason I say that is that a lot of times we try to jump right to the solution, and we need these ready now candidates, and everybody's really starving for that. But you also need to ensure that you plan thoughtfully. Scoping was something we mentioned earlier, and to be able to actually go through the process and ensure that you're looking at all of those steps. It's really important from that sustainability perspective, and you'll see that at the end of the day, you'll really get the results that you're looking for, and all that planning pays off.
Beautifully said. Lakeisha, how about you?
Yeah, I would say Tracy said it beautifully. What I like to say is we want it right, not rushed. So, and I think that speaks directly to what Tracy's talking about. we've been trained to pitch the solution, right? And I think TPM flips it on its head. And sometimes that can be a little jarring, but I think what I would say is you want to make sure that you get all your facts straight. So create that space for employers to really honestly communicate what is important to them before necessarily trying to bring everybody to the table. Because, in our experience, that can slow things down just a bit. So, the process that we've experienced, it probably sounds too good to be true, but it took a while. So it really did not happen like in a month or 2 months. And, even some of the examples that I shared, like we had to start over sometimes, right? Because we needed to get the facts straight. So I would just say, I would echo what Tracy said in terms of, trust the process. And I think Jason Tishko always says that too, trust the process. And, it'll work. It will work. We've seen that time and time again. And get those champions on board first. Get excited is what I would say. Like nobody's going to want to hear about TPM if you're not excited about it. So get excited, get some champions, and trust the process.
Well, that was absolutely perfect in terms of ending words and parting words from both of you. So a huge, huge thank you, of course, to the WIOA American Jobs Center for hosting us today, but a huge thank you to you, Lakeisha and Tracy, for your leadership in the TPM network, all the incredible contributions that your organizations and your communities have made. We continue to get better thanks to practitioners and leaders like you who just continue to feed us with information and your learnings so that we can then lend those learnings to the network overall. So for anybody who is interested in learning more about talent pipeline management, encourage you to reach out to me either by email or feel free to go to our website, thetalentsupplychain.org, and we'd be glad to support your efforts as you consider what talent strategies make the most sense for your community. So again, thank you, and we look forward to talking with you all soon.